All right, our work today is what is Alexander's father's name? Alexander the Great. Can't pick a random Alexander. Has to be Alexander the Great. Okay, today's lesson is called The Spread of Greek Culture. So, Greek art and architecture is highly recognizable. You may not have even realized it, but Greek art and architecture is seen all over the world today. It can be pretty easily identified by specific shared characteristics like the columns that we see, or by featuring Greek gods and goddesses, or idealized bodies. So Greek art had like the perfect body on their sculptures, right? Or in their painting, it was the perfect woman. So those are all identifiable characteristics of Greek art. Okay, so this is the ancient theater of Epidaurus. I think there's quite a few of you who, if I just showed you this picture, you would be able to identify that it's Greek, or maybe you would have said Roman because the Roman and Greek cultures get so intertwined, but I feel like a lot of you would have said Greek. Porch of Maidens in Athens. I feel like, again, if I showed you this structure, you may have had a good chance of identifying that this is a Greek architecture. Another example where I feel like you maybe would have been able to identify this as Greek. I threw this example in there just to show you, like, we're not just talking about architecture necessarily, but their art in general. So these idealized bodies, right? So this is a Thondoros. I don't know all the Greek gods' names. Hagisandros and Polydoros of Rhodes. Basically, it's Laocoon and his sons. And if you look at the man, he has like an idealized body, right? So he's strong, muscular, he's your like ultimate man or whatever, right? So this is a typical style of Greek art. Also getting bit by a snake, that looks rough. Okay, but we see, like I said, this architecture throughout the world. So this image is a picture or an image of the Lincoln Memorial. And those columns are the columns I was talking about, right? So that is a very clearly Greek style building. Okay, so as we begin to analyze, I want you to keep in mind, or keep this prompt in mind, I guess. So again, we've talked about it a couple lessons now, but why and how did Greek traditions influence both European and Asian communities during the classical period? So we have to identify what are these Greek traditions, right? So for example, we just looked at some of their art, but why and how did they influence European and Asian communities? All right, so source 3 is an excerpt from Eric Nelson and Robert Strayer, Ways of the World 2019. It says, a fair amount of cultural interaction and blending occurred. In both Egypt and Mesopotamia, Greek rulers patronized the building of temples to local gods. And to patronize basically means like to snub or look down upon, and actively supported their priests. A growing number of native people were able to become Greek citizens by getting a Greek education, speaking the language, dressing appropriately, and assuming a Greek name. In India, Greeks were assimilated into the hierarchy of the caste system as members of the, I actually don't, Kshatriya, I'm not sure how to say that, or the warrior caste, while in Bactria, a substantial number of Greeks converted to Buddhism, right? And so, in case you didn't know, to assimilate is like to absorb into the culture, tradition of a population, so to become like them. Jot down your initial observations, and then come back and we'll move on to the questions. All right, so once you've jotted down your initial observations, we can move on to the questions. So for this worksheet, I put your initial observations as a question, so you didn't miss them. But number 2, what long-term effect can we predict will happen as a result of Greek leaders patronizing temples to local gods and advocating for support of their own priests? For number 3, complete the sentence. While source 3 gives examples of how Greeks were able to spread their culture, it also gives examples of, all right, source 4. This image is from John Boardman's The Greeks in Asia, published in 2015. It is a silver gilt medallion from Kuban, which is South Russia. it likely hung from jewelry. The other example they said is like maybe like from like a really fancy horse's outfit, but like a charm. It pictures Dionysus riding a lion, and Athena fights a naked giant with a vine border. So go ahead and jot down your initial observations. You can pause and go back if you need to. But why would Russians have images on their jewelry that reflect Greek gods and goddesses? All right, so hopefully you've heard of Medusa before. I think everyone has, but in case you haven't, we're going to talk about her in just a moment. So, although painted more in art than in story, Greek mythology Medusa was a once beautiful woman whose name became so synonymous with terrifying. Athena made her so hideous, one look at her could turn a mortal to stone or lithify them. Slithering, venomous snakes replaced the hair on Medusa's head. The mythological Greek hero Perseus performed a service to mankind by ridding the world of her fearsome power. He cut off her head with the help of gifts from Hades, Athena, and Hermes. From Medusa's severed neck sprang the winged horses Pegasus and Chrysaor. Okay, so that's just like the very, very basics of the story of Medusa. If you've never read it or learned about it, you should do that on your own. It's a good story. But anyway, source 5 and 6, we're going to do kind of together. Source 5 is an archaic antefix, and an antefix is like an ornament on at the eaves of a classical building, so it's just like goes on the outside of a structure. And source 5 is from the Athenian Acropolis. Source 6 is a statue of Perseus holding the head of Medusa, like after he cut it off in the story, at the Piazza della Signoria in Florence. It's a bronze sculpture by Cellini, and it was made in 1554. So you may have to pause the video and just go back a second or two, but jot down your initial observations for each. If you look on your worksheet, there is a spot for each one, so don't miss them. Number 7, how do sources 5 and 6 depict how the Greeks' polytheistic beliefs influenced their art? And number 8, why are the two pieces of art so different? Lastly, some of you are very creative, and I like to give you the opportunity to use your skill set. So while we do a lot of reading and writing, I think it's important to kind of try to change things up a little bit. So that's why I sometimes give you the opportunity to draw. So I would like you to draw an example of Greek art. Now listen, this isn't just like a, here you go, color something. You do need to show me that you understand like what of the characteristics of Greek art would be. So if you're not a great artist, that's okay, I understand. But try to draw me something that you think would be representative of Greek art. And if you're not sure, like I'd be able to identify what it is about that you're saying is Greek just because maybe you're not the best artist, just give me a sentence with it, right? So if you draw Medusa and you're like, those snakes, I don't know if she'll know that that's who Medusa is or whatever, just say this is Medusa. But that is it. Once you're done with this, you can upload it onto Canvas, and that's it. Have a good day. Bye.